This is the Steve Cochran Show on Chicago's very own 720 WGN.
9:12 now as we continue live from the Allstate Showcase studio. Happy to have a legend in studio. You know, I like to take this 9 o'clock hour many days, if not most days, and introduce you to people that we think you ought to know. And certainly one with us right now. He is Gabe Spataro, a Korean War vet, whose story is much deeper than that. And also joining us with him, Gabe, is Jim Elliott, president of Diveheart. And you can go to diveheart.org. There's some amazing stories to tell there, and Jim's got a few himself. Jim, would you put that microphone right in front of Gabe, if you would? Just pull that right over there so he's talking right into it, and then get him as close to it as you can there. Just lead up. Gabe, you've got some vision issues, right? That's the only thing you're dealing with.
Yeah, macular degeneration.
Does that make you legally blind at this point?
Yeah, I'm legally blind.
All right. Now,
I'm a veteran, and the VA... I go there to the hospital, and they sent me to Hines, where they have a building for blind veterans, and they teach us how to use a cane and how to put marks on different doors and stuff so you know where you're at.
So you can navigate around.
Yeah, and...
You look like you're in great health. How old are you?
85.
85 years old.
What I tell people is I celebrated my 46th anniversary of my 39th birthday, June 20th.
You don't need to make any excuses. You still got your hair. Where did you serve?
Korea.
All right.
I was a draftee.
Okay. In what branch?
In the Army, in the helicopters.
Oh, you're a chopper guy.
Well, see, I was drafted in the Army, and they sent me to Korea in January of 54.
Okay.
And I was replacing a supply sergeant in a helicopter company. And I was doing a pretty good job, so they made me a corporal.
Oh, really? Bumped you up there.
And then we changed from a company to a battalion, and they made me a supply sergeant of a helicopter battalion.
Okay.
So I went from a corporal to a sergeant.
Yeah, pretty good bump.
And I wasn't even in the Army a year and a half.
Yeah, well, you know what? Able-bodied. But you obviously distinguish yourself well there. But what I'm trying to figure out where you developed your love for the water.
I don't know. I guess I swam. I went to the YMCA when I was 7 years old and learned how to swim.
Okay.
And
but you're telling me off the air when you got home from Korea, you bought a boat.
Well, yeah, we bought a 34-foot sailboat. My two brothers and I, we were all in service at the same time, and we got out about the same time. And they're older than I am. And we have an Italian restaurant in Chicago.
What was the restaurant?
Sparga's Pizzeria. Yeah, actually, Sparga's Italian restaurant.
You used to drop off pizzas here, I heard.
Oh, yeah. That was back in the 50s. It's program called Spin Time on Saturday afternoon.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And it was a lot of fun.
Looks like we missed out on the pizza. But I bet the recipe's still good. But eventually you come to become quite a diver.
Well, that happened. See, at the restaurant, I would go around and say hello to the people and say, how'd you like the pizza? And, what are you doing tomorrow? And there was a young couple eating pizza, and I went up to them and introduced myself, and they said, Gabriel, this is the most delicious pizza we've ever had. So I really got into a conversation with them.
Sure.
And then I asked them, what are you guys doing tomorrow? And they said, we're going on a picnic. Well, a picnic is beer and hot dogs.
Sure, sitting in the park.
Yeah. But he mentioned the word scuba, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus.
Right.
Now, I had never heard this word. I didn't know anything about diving scuba, but I like to swim.
Right.
So I horned in on their picnic. They came pick me up the next day, and they took me out to Lake Geneva. And Art, the fella's name, he put fins on me. I never had fins before.
Right.
He put a weight belt on me. He put a tank on my back. He put a mask and a snorkel on my head. And he said, Gabriel, the only instruction I'm going to give you is don't stop breathing. Now, here, you're going underwater. Who wants to stop breathing?
Right.
But that is very important, how you breathe.
And you fell in love with it right away.
Then we got into water. And I couldn't breathe. So I came up and I said, Art, I can't breathe. He said, did you turn the tank on? I mean, who knows about turning a tank on?
It's my first day.
So he came over and turned the tank on, and we went down. And Lake Geneva isn't the most pristine place, but it was, for the first time, really terrific.
Yeah, and there's a great story about a pretty significant dive you made not too long ago, but let's back this up a little farther, too.
Well,
the Christ of the Deep statue.
Well,
you were significant, along with several others, in bringing the Christ of the Deep statue over here, where it's become the most visited underwater tourist attraction ever.
The thing about the statue, in 60, a friend of mine was going to be president of the Underwater Society of America, Carl Hauber.
Okay.
And he said, Gabriel, at my convention, I want you to be my chairman. And we were going to have the convention in August of 62.
Okay.
And we were going to have it at the Palmer House. And then he told me, he said, you know, Kresge, the swim fin manufacturer, is donating a 9-foot bronze statue of Christ to the the Underwater Society Council, and I'm going to present that at the convention. I'd like you to take care of it. So this was 60, and I was going to take a trip to Europe to be a wine connoisseur. And I figured, well, I might as well go visit where the statue's being made.
Right.
So I went to Genoa, and I met Kresge and Guido Galletti, who was the artist.
These are all real names, Dave.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any phony about them. I had lunch with them. But anyhow, they showed me a picture of the statue, and I said, oh, that's beautiful. You know.
Sure.
I said, how are you getting it to Chicago? And Kresge said, Gabe, we're giving it to you, but you got to get it there.
Right. Moving's not included.
Yeah. So when I came back to Chicago, I called Carl up and I said, you know, that's a beautiful statue, but he said, we've got to get it to Chicago. They're giving it to us, but we got to get it here. And I said, how much money do we have? And he said, well, we don't have any. So anyhow, I was telling my father the story about the Italians giving the statue to the Americans. And my father knew a lot of Italian people. And he said, Gabriel, why don't you go downtown and talk to the American Express, the friend of ours down there, and see if they can't help you.
Yeah, a little sponsorship.
So I went down and shook hands with the guy, and he said, Gabriel, sit down and tell me, when do you want the statue, but not tomorrow?
Right.
My father told him the whole story, that the Italians were giving it to the Americans. So I said, no, our convention is in August, so if I get it the first week of August of 62, that's fine. He says, okay, don't worry about it, you'll get it.
How about that? How about stepping up? How about stepping up and getting it done?
This statue is in a 16-foot crate by 6 feet by 4 feet, several tons on one end.
Sure.
And that's,
you're not putting that in a FedEx envelope.
Yeah, and that's coming from Genoa, Italy to Navy Pier, Chicago.
All right, now how's it end up off the coast of Key Largo?
Well, the thing was, I went to the president, I said, you know, we're going to get the statue here, but where is it going to be put? Because Lake Michigan isn't the place for the statue.
Right.
And he said, well, Gabriel, we've got 3 clubs that are interested, one in California, one in Texas, and one in Florida. So I just happened to have a little free time, and I flew out to California, you know, just one of those accident things.
Yeah.
And I went diving with the guys in California, and the Pacific Ocean was nice and clear and warm, but it was like a forest of kelp, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall.
Right, and you got to be able to see it. You can't drop the statue in the kelp bed. You got to be able to see it.
So then I made a contact in Florida, in Texas, and I flew down, and the fella had a 100-foot sailboat, you know, 3-masted schooner.
Sure.
And we went sailing and diving out in the Gulf of Mexico.
Another scouting ground.
But now that was plain ground, you know, just clean sand.
Right.
No, nothing, just clean sand. And it was nice, clear water, but that was it. And then I made a contact with John Pennycamp, and one of the directors of the Florida Parks and Recreation and Museums.
That's the Key Largo connection.
And then we had lunch, and I showed them a picture of the statue, and they said, oh, Gabriel, that's got to go with, you know, John Pennycamp Coral Reef State Park. And I agreed with them. So when I came back to Chicago, I told the president, Carl, and he called Pennycamp on the phone, and they talked, and then he sent a letter in January of 62, January 62, he sent a letter.
Right.
And asked them if they would accept, if we would give them the statue. And they agreed. And so we set it all up at the hotel that the Kresge would give it to the Underwater Society would give it to Florida.
And when did it actually go in the water?
It took 2.5 years after we got the statue here. It went in the water in July of 65.
When we come back, Jim Elliott's going to explain how Gabe finally got to dive and see the Christ statue off Key Largo. And it's a pretty cool story. And as Jim put it, a bunch of old guys were going down there and they were going to die. I think I was going to go with them. So anyway, we'll come back. We'll talk with more of the amazing Gabe Spataro. And don't forget about Diveheart here. We'll talk more about Diveheart too. Diveheart.org. More coming up. Steve Cochran Show, 720 WGN and CLTV. Every dive, you find out something new about diving.
Mm-hmm. Illinois School of Psychology researchers found that the very first pool session is very powerful. It creates a paradigm shift. It's not Johnny in a wheelchair anymore. It's Johnny the scuba diver.
Right.
Once he does that, he thinks he can go on and take on other challenges, right? If I can scuba dive, I can do anything. So with social media, we take photos and video, give it to the kid or the vet or whatever, and all of a sudden, they're like rock stars. They roll into a party, and it's like, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I went diving.
Diving.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's like, how do you dive? You're a quadriplegic. It
brings people out of their shell, and it's a great story to tell.
Yeah.
All right, so how did you meet our friend Gabe?
Well, I was teaching a bunch of blind veterans at Hines VA Hospital, and I met Gabe, and he starts to tell me that he's been diving since the 50s, and I'm like, well, why am I certifying you now?
Right, it's like putting a master chef in a beginning cooking class, right?
So he says, well, you didn't need certification back then. I said, well, you're right. That was like bootleg diving back in the early days. Yeah. So then he starts to tell me about that he brought the Christ statue, the journey, he brought it from Italy over to the U.S., and I'm going, you brought the Christ statue over. It's the most viewed underwater object in the world, probably generated $1 billion in tourism since the 60s when it went down. And
by the way, Gabe didn't get any of that.
No, and I didn't believe him until he started bringing in photographs. I went, oh my God. And then I'm driving him home in 2013 from a fundraiser, and he says, Jim, I'm going to dive the Christ statue. And I go, well, you probably dove it 50 times. You brought it here in the 60s. He goes, I've never dove it. I go, what? He goes, yeah, I'm going with my buddy Vinny, who's got one leg, and my buddy Louie, who's also blind. And we're taking Vinny's fishing boat, which is like 8 feet long, and we're going to go 8 miles out in the ocean. And I go, you're going to die. and I'm like,
I survived Korea. I'll be fine.
Yeah, so I called my vendor, Rainbow Reef. They cleared 8 paid spots and took us out. And we had a chase boat with like so many cameras. Miami Herald ran a front page story.
Sure, yeah, you can see it online. Yeah,
amazing story.
And you went out with him, and for the first time, Gabe got to see the statue. He was absolutely instrumental in getting here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was, this man, if there's anybody that does documentaries that listen to your show, he definitely is a candidate for that. No kidding. If not a feature film.
This is perfect for the Outdoor Channel. This is just a great feature story for anybody. Anyway, Gabe, lean into that microphone again, if you would, for me for a second. And tell me what it felt like when you saw that statue underwater.
Well, it's a personal thing.
Sure.
It's not a religious thing.
Yeah.
It's a personal thing between you and the statue, that inside you, your whole body is just warmed, and you feel. I can't really explain it.
But it should make you feel good. I know Jim started to mention this as well.
It really
because
does.
of the amount of tourism that's gone through there, you really have changed lives. You've changed lives to have an opportunity for people who do that dive to actually see that Christ statue underwater. The most visited underwater tourist attraction ever.
Well, we never thought of it that way when we were doing it. We just thought we had a job to do, and we had something to present to the American divers. And, I mean, I didn't do it alone.
Sure,
I had people who helped me, like the steamship line brought it from, Italy to Navy Pier.
Right.
And then when it was at Navy Pier, they had a truck that brought it to the hotel free. And then at the hotel, I went to the manager and said, we've got this 9-foot bronze statue we want to dedicate at our convention, at our banquet. And he said, well, we're a union house. You just get the union people to move it and put it on the banquet hall.
That's the deals in Chicago were made by handshakes and just get it done.
Well, I went to the union, and they said, well, that's about an $1,800 job. We'll only charge you $900. Now, $900 to take it up 2 floors in a hotel.
Big deal.
And it came across the ocean 5,000 miles.
Right.
So one of my guys was a baggage handler for TWA, and he was union. So I took him into the manager's office, and I said, this is my union guy. He's going to handle the statue. And we were all young. We were in our 30s, so we could handle it. and we were able to do it. And then at my restaurant, I would always mention what I was doing to my customers. And one of my customers was a florist.
Okay.
And he said, well, Gabriel, since you got this beautiful statue, I'll decorate it. So he came and he put ferns and flowers and that around it. And my cousin was a newspaper reporter for the Daily News. That was when the Daily News was still here.
Sure.
And he had a friend of his who came from Africa, a missionary. And he had the missionaries make the litany for the dedication of the statue going from Italy to America.
So everybody chimed in.
And in that litany, I wish I had the copy of it. I can't find it. I had it someplace. But what it amounted to was that the statue was for those who live, work, play, fight, and die at sea. And that was the basic thing
moving.
For the statue in the water.
It's very moving. Very moving. You've got an amazing life, young man.
Oh, I can't complain at all.
I think you're just getting started. You know what you got to do? And I say this to all of my older friends. You got to get this down on tape. You got to have somebody sit down. I don't know if it's your nephew, your grandson, your daughter, somebody. We got to sit down with you and just let you talk about your life, because this history needs to be preserved. These are great stories.
Well.
And you know what? We'll put this interview right in the middle of all of it.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't know. Being in the Italian restaurant business most of my life, here in Chicago, it's 7 days a week, 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
But when you had free time, I wouldn't stay in Chicago.
Yeah, you'd try.
I would leave.
Have a little bit of the wanderlust.
Instantly, I would leave. And being a member of Columbia Yacht Club, one winter we were sitting at the bar and Lake Michigan was frozen over. And I asked the guys, I said, what do you do in the winter when the lake freezes over? And they said, oh, we go down to Miami and get on a sailboat and race in the SORC, the Southern Ocean Racing Circuit.
Okay.
So I happen to have that area between the middle of January to the middle of February free, because here in Chicago we had blizzards and ice.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
And that was the worst time for a restaurant, the lowest business time we had. So I would take that month between the middle of January to the middle of February and go to Florida, get on a sailboat, and race in the Lipton Cup race out of Miami, and race to Nassau.
You just love the water.
And then race around the island with the Governor's Cup. And here you are, 10 days, 3 ocean races, and you end up in the Bahamas with your scuba gear.
Pretty good life.
I mean,
and a lot of pretty girls.
You see how difficult Gabriel's life really was.
Yeah, you know what? As a matter of fact, I'm envying you even more. It's the legend, Gabe Spataro. By the way, Spataro. Google that up and see a guy who's lived a life. And Jim Elliott from Diveheart. And Jim, I'd love to have people support Diveheart. So diveheart.org.
Diveheart.org, yeah. And I think if there's only one thing, I'd love to see the Italian-American Hall of Fame recognize this guy.
Absolutely.
And he's a Chicago's very own legend. I mean, he's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm watching him, too. I'm going to learn a few more things. I got to get him together with my Uncle Dana. You two'd be dangerous together. It's Gabe Spataro. We got to take a break. Or come back with the big story next on 720 WGN.